So in this video, I'm going to look at units of information. This is an awful lot of conversion work, up and down between units, comparing units to each other. It's something that you need to get your head around. You won't have a calculator in the exam, so it's important that you can do this with a fair amount of confidence. So what do you need to be able to do, and what do you actually need to know? Well, you need to start off with the idea that the bit is the most basic information unit that computers use. Bits represent either 1 or 0, they don't represent anything else. A byte is 8 bits, and byte quantities can be represented with different prefixes. You'll see what that means in a minute. You also need to be able to convert between units of information, so between bits and bytes and kilobytes. And you need to be able to compare and order different units to each other. So let's have a look at a table which will give us some idea of what's going on. So as we go through, you'll see 1 bit, 1 byte, and now we get into the prefixes: 1 kilobyte, 1 megabyte, 1 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, and these are the ones you need to know. Whenever you do a question on this, make sure you show your units. So make sure you say, I'm converting this into, and then say what it is, megabytes, etc., etc. So here are some tips for the conversion that might help you as you go through. So to go from bits to bytes, you divide by 8. To go from bytes to bits, you multiply by 8. To go from bytes to kilobytes, you multiply by 1,000. And to go from kilobytes to bytes, you divide by 1,000. So the awkward bit is the bit between bits and bytes, because you either have to divide or multiply by 8, depending which way you go. Tips 3 and 4 apply to bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, and terabytes. So here are some examples of how to do these conversions. I would strongly suggest that what you do is you have a little look at them, break them down for yourselves, pause, just check how they've worked. So notice, for example, with this one, 64,000 bits leads to, if I convert that to bytes, leads to 8,000 bytes. That's the one way you have to divide it by 8. And if you work your way through, you'll see how to convert that from bytes into kilobytes. Nice big one. From bits into gigabytes. Here we are with one that goes from megabytes to kilobytes. So multiplying our way up. Now we're going again from megabytes to kilobytes, but a much bigger number now. Again, multiplying up. Notice the use of the units. That's really important that you give those, otherwise you might lose marks, or you will lose marks. And here we are from gigabytes to megabytes, again multiplying our way to find those megabytes. Okay, let's have a look at how the exam questions in this area work. People often get stuck on these because they don't slow themselves down and think about what they're trying to do. So here's a very typical one, this conversion, a nice simple one. A bit more challenging, having to put things in order, so you have to convert them all to the same unit in order to figure that one out. Another conversion here for a sound file. There are separate sound questions, so don't get confused between this one and the other sound questions that are coming up soon. So pause the video, have a go at the questions. Answers will be up just after this. So here are the answers to these exam questions. On this one here, you get marks for the working, you get marks for the units. So always use those. This next one is probably the most challenging that I've found that people struggle with. So make sure you convert these to the same unit, otherwise you can't compare them very easily. Number 3, you need to break down into 2 or 3 elements. So we're going first of all from bits to bytes. That's the bit that people get wrong. They forget to divide or multiply by 8. And finally, I'm going to go from bytes to kilobytes. And because I'm showing my working, I'm showing my units, even if I do go a bit wrong with my calculations, I'm still going to get some credit for it. Very similar to question 2, this one. So pause the video and check your answers against these ones and make sure that you are happy with what's being said. So finally, a summary of the main points that we've covered in this video on information units. So here are the knowledge and skills that you need. So you need to know that the bit is the most basic unit of information that computers hold. You need to know that bits represent either 1 or 0, but they can't represent anything else. You need to know that a byte is 8 bits. You need to know that byte quantities can be represented with different prefixes like megabyte or gigabyte. You need to be able to convert between units. And you need to be able to compare and order different units. Here's some top tips for you. So number 1 is, if you're going from bits to bytes, remember to divide by 8. If you're going from bytes to bits, you need to multiply by 8. But if you're going from bytes to kilobytes, you multiply by 1,000. And if you're going from kilobytes to bytes, then you divide by 1,000. And just remember that tip 3 and tip 4 apply to bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, and terabytes.